All right, everybody. So today we're going to do a couple of things. So that you know, I'm going to wrap up talking about St. Augustine and the medieval period there. And then we are going to review for your exam, which I don't know if you know this or not, but it's coming up on the 17th. So what does that mean? What are my exams like? How do you study for it? All that fun stuff. How do you get an A? But first, let's wrap up the medieval period in St. Augustine, because this will be the last thing on the exam. So you'll be reading Christine de Pizan and Ramus for next week, but those two will not be on the exam. Does that make sense to you? All right. So we will start at the beginning of the course all the way to St. Augustine for the exam. I don't know what this is. Okay. So we know that the medieval period was focused heavily on what?
The church.
The church. We were trying to persuade people to be Christians, to belong to the church, and we were also trying to figure out how to preach the church, or the church's rules. We also used the word of the Pope, of the church, as our fact-finding, as the truth that we were trying to share. There was a huge switch during the medieval period, you might have noticed this, from rhetoric and politics to rhetoric and preaching. This had a very specific name in Latin. In the original rhetoric, from what we translated, it was called Ars Rhetoricae, meaning on rhetoric. This is, I'm not going to test you on that. I never spelled this right. And my father is going to roll over in his grave when I mispronounce it. Ars Predicandi is on preaching, okay? The reason why I tell you this is because at the time of the medieval period, education was marked by the trivium. So education was greatly impacted, first because of the focus on the church, second because they had these three things that you had to learn. And they were grammar, so the proper way to speak, and to write as well. I don't want you guys to think this is all just speaking. This is writing as well. Logic, and then preaching. An entire education system changed from a focus on logic, grammar, and rhetoric to a focus on logic, grammar, and preaching. This is important for the impact on teaching or on education later. So if you take classical Greece and Rome, and you apply it to preaching, then you get the practice of rhetoric during the medieval period. Does that make sense to you? Sort of a math. So, we get this trivium of teaching grammar, logic, and preaching. It is used for reading or for writing as well as for speaking. And at this time, we begin to see a heavy focus on letter writing. Now, this won't become developed until much later during the Renaissances, but this is where we first start to see the art of letter writing. What is the art of letter writing? Literally the ability to write letters, okay? I don't mean the actual alphabet. I mean how you write your letter. Did anybody ever see Pride and Prejudice or read it?
I
No?
was on the background a lot with my mom.
Okay. In that book or in that movie, depending on it doesn't matter which one you read or watch, this is the same message. They talk about Elizabeth and her sisters being so desirable because of their ability to write good letters. So, and Darcy seduces Elizabeth with letters, and I don't remember the other one's name, gets seduced by her man with letter. They don't really communicate by letter. They more communicate by being with each other, but Darcy and Elizabeth, it's all about the letter writing. This was a huge deal during the medieval period. Although you had to be educated in order to get ink, or to know how to write and to know how to read. And in Augustine's time, that would have meant that you had to somehow be serving in the church, which meant you were most likely male. So as we go through the medieval period, move towards next week when we're talking about Christine de Pizan, you have to know that there's literally like 900, 800, 600 years, depending on who you talk to, that are all men in the church who are writing. And that's where the entire education system was based off of. I don't know how we stagnated that long with those things. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, my daughter takes like 9 classes in her high school, and I don't know how they fit those into a day, but it seems like 3 things over the course of 1,000 years would be a lot harder. I don't really get it. But they were tilling the land, they weren't writing. Now, the reason why we teach this in this class is probably a question you're asking yourself, like for the love of God, or whatever. Why are we doing this? For the love of French fries, stop making me listen to this. Why? So I'm about to tell you why. Are you happy? No? Okay. One person nodded, just so everybody on the recording knows. The reason why I introduce you to this here is because Augustine started to introduce the very beginnings of what's going to become now, rhetorical analysis will eventually turn into rhetorical criticism, meaning that we're actually critiquing the rhetoric that we're reading. But for right now, since all of our knowledge comes from where? The church. We don't need to criticize it, we only need to analyze it and make sure that we understand it. So the very first steps of rhetorical analysis were done during the medieval period in studying the Bible. And what they did was they put the Bible and the church's teachings into the proper context. So they were essentially recontextualizing the Bible and the church teachings. This was a practice known as hermeneutics. What is hermeneutics? Hermeneutics it just means interpretation for the most part. Hermeneutics is when you revisit the same rhetoric over and over again, and each time putting in or getting out something different from it. So let me not use the Bible as an example of hermeneutics, okay? Is that cool with you? Although this was all the Bible all the time, and all the church teaching all the time, all the Christian doctrine all the time. But let me give you an example that might make more sense. In 1963, President John F. Kennedy was killed, as you all know, because of our first day of class or whatever that was. President John F. Kennedy was shot and killed. Immediately following it, people started to speculate about how it happened, right? And people started saying, well, if you look at it from this angle, you see this. If you look at what's known as the Zapruder film, I can't say that name, Zapruder film? I can never say the name. Doesn't matter, you guys probably don't know what I'm talking about. It was the only original filming of the gunshot that we got. So whenever you see that famous scene of John Kennedy's head getting hit and Jackie climbing out of the back of the car, that's the Zapruder film. It's the only original film that we have from the time, from the incident. After JFK was shot, a series of things start to happen. People want to know what really happened, right? And so there was an entire commission, the Warren Commission, who came up after careful study of the film and everything else and witness statements with what they called the magic bullet theory. The idea that only one bullet managed to hit two guys in three very different places. Not really sure how that happened because Kennedy's guard got hit too. I don't think a lot of people know that. He didn't die, but he got hit. So there was apparently one bullet that traveled through a guy's shoulder into Kennedy's head, bounced and went out the other side of his head. It's like nutty. It's nutty. And if you read this thing, they justify every single argument to come to this conclusion. Later on, people started doing things like testing. The bullet, for example. Is it possible that one bullet, and what I remember, could go through that much flesh and bone and still be a bullet at the end? And the answer was essentially no, but okay. So there was a different interpretation of how Kennedy was shot. And then in the 90s, Oliver Stone made a film called JFK. Yet another revision of how, or reinterpretation of how Kennedy was killed. Each time someone wrote a book or a paper or looked at a film and interpreted it, each time that happened, that was a different interpretation. And by the time we get to 2025, we have some answers to questions that those previous interpretations didn't have. For example, the guy with the umbrella, he finally came out and said, I was just standing there with my umbrella. Why is that important? Because for literally decades, people speculated that the guy with the umbrella had something to do with the shooting of JFK. He didn't, and nobody knew who he was, but he finally came out. He was like, it was me, and there was nothing, you know. There was also the woman in the babushka. She's called the babushka lady. Do you guys know what a babushka is? Huh?
Russian grandma?
That is so good, yes. I mean, some people call them Baba from that, but that would be anything Bavarian, Russian, all that stuff. But it actually refers to a certain type of head covering that women, older women, would wear in the rain that tied under your chin. And it was like plastic, essentially. I had some of these. And it basically fit your head really tight, not really tightly, but tightly to hold your curls in place. And then you tied it underneath to keep it dry. And then when you went in, you go to the inside, you go into the bathroom and you fluff your hair and you're good to go. That's called a babushka. She was called a babushka lady because she was wearing a babushka, and she was probably a babushka, to be honest with you. She was found out, and she didn't have anything to do with it, which that took less time to figure out than the umbrella guy. Literally, I feel like the umbrella guy came, and by the way, they do refer to these people this way: babushka lady, umbrella man. Literally, that's how they're called. And I think he was just really like maybe 2 years ago, like maybe. Although if I were him, I wouldn't want to come out of the woodwork either, because you would have been hounding. Each one is a new interpretation. Each one looks at it through a new, what we're going to call a lens of interpretation. Me telling you about this is an additional lens of interpretation, drawing your attention to new things, focusing only on certain things, telling you what those might or might not mean is a rhetorical analysis. Now, imagine doing that with the stories from the Bible or the church teachings. That's what rhetorical analysis was made up of. And hermeneutics is essentially for that idea of repeatedly interpreting an event, most of the time a story about an event. The Bible is a big one. That's probably the biggest one. Most of the time, I don't hear the word hermeneutics unless I'm talking to people about religious studies. It's very rare you'll hear it.
Does any other type of media survive that long where it's able to be reinterpreted as much as
the Bible?
The Bible?
No. I mean, the Bible is well, I'm not going to say it's the oldest document, but it is the most widely distributed, most printed, in all languages. I mean, I could go see the Dead Sea Scrolls, which I thought were these big scrolls, and it turns out they're this big. I can't read what's on there. Even if I could see it, I can't read what's on there, right? Because I don't know that language. So even though they might be older than the Bible, no, they can't be studied and recontextualized and restudied as much as the Bible can. Now, that doesn't mean people haven't tried. People have tried to fill in what might be meant on the Dead Sea Scrolls, but apparently they don't really say anything important. It's a meatloaf recipe, basically. It's not a meatloaf. You know what I mean. That level of importance. Instructions on time, I'm not really sure. You'd have to really dig into that one. But, no, the Bible is the most interpreted and most read book in history. Really don't know that it's going to be topped. Maybe the Thriller album by Michael Jackson, I don't know. He hasn't had the time yet, the Bible has been around since, as a physical thing, you're talking 400s, 5 to 700s, somewhere in there. But at the time, we were still writing down the oral tradition of what we believe happened and what we believe. You guys know that, the Gospels weren't written until at least 100 years after Jesus was on the earth, right? It's not like he was sitting down with Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John going, here's what I want you to tell my story. It didn't work like that. Mary Magdalene wasn't sitting there going, okay, here's what happened. It was not contemporary to Jesus' life. So that idea of constantly reinterpreting it makes sense when you think about it, right? I do it all the time. If I'm talking to someone about Christianity, for example, I might say, well, in the New Testament, it says blank. And they'll say, well, in the Old Testament, it says this. And I'm like, New Testament, new promise, new covenant. We should be following the New Testament. Jesus says that, right? That idea of reinterpreting over and over again. This will become very important for paper 2, the idea of a rhetorical analysis, because that's what you're doing in paper 2. Make sense? All right, so see, we do get a little bit more out of the medieval period than just St. Augustine, which I guess is good. Okay, I'm going to erase this. Paper 1 is up and ready for you. I did write out the instructions as requested. You may upload that anytime until the due date. I don't recommend waiting till the very end to do it. You can always write it now, reread it the night before, and send it in. But I don't recommend starting the night before. told you that we would do is talk about your exam. It's so hard. My exams. I mean, I'm telling you, this professor's a real pain in the ass. Here's the deal. Your exam is online. It will be available for a week. And a week only. Only 7 days. I'm telling you this because I've had people come to me after the week and go, Dr. Dinesh, I couldn't take that exam because of blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, no.
Get a week.
You had a week. If you're sick, hopefully you get over it and you have a few hours to take the exam, whatever. If you have to go on vacation, take the exam before you go. Take it with you. All you need is an internet connection and your computer, your laptop, right? I mean, so you can do it whenever you want within that week. Bless you. It will take approximately less than an hour, is my guess. It is not a particularly huge test. There are no essays on the exam at all whatsoever. You see why this is so difficult. There's multiple choice, a lot of multiple choice, and then a few short answer. And no short answer, I will give you some examples of those today. So what we're going to do is we are going to run through what is going to be on the exam and give you a little review so that you can also get an idea of how I ask the questions. This is better than a quiz, right? Now, there's only 3 of you. So I don't expect that you'll know all the answers or whatnot. But if you think you know the answer, go ahead and answer, okay? So let's start with a short answer example. List and briefly define the 3 artificial proofs from Aristotle. These are just examples, just so you guys know. I won't necessarily put them right on the exam the same way. I don't want you to think that I'm giving you the exam right now. Anybody? The 3 artificial proofs from Aristotle? Okay, you don't know. What do you do now? If you're taking the test.
Look at my notes.
Huh?
It's open note, right? With it being.
You're at your place. What do I know?
That's what I assumed.
Okay, so yeah, you're going to open your notes maybe? Or the book? And find the answer. This is the longest part of the exam. Finding the answer. Did anybody find it? That's the 3 levels of style. It is. Does anybody want to define those? Briefly? 1 or 2 words? Okay, yeah, credibility, good.
And the feeling and logos is using your words.
Okay, yeah, good. Logos is using your words to demonstrate your logic. Pathos is emotions, right? Using emotional appeals. Good. Do you see how that went? Yeah? Okay. Let me give you another question. According to Augustine, You have to get this right, I think. According to Augustine, the first thing that you should do before you practice rhetoric is A, sleep, B, read, C, pray, or D, practice. A, sleep, B, read, C, pray, or D, practice. If it helps, I said this on Tuesday. Pray. Thank you very much. The answer is C, pray. Hopefully that's in your notes somewhere too. Or you just remembered. So the idea is that I don't want to know what you don't know. I want to know what you do know. And if you don't know it, I want to know that you're able to find the answer. There will not be a question on this exam that we did not cover or that your book does not very clearly make as an important concept or idea. I don't know if it bolds words or what it does, but I know that me and the book agree about what's important from each theorist. Makes sense? Okay, we ready to try another multiple choice? Okay. Plato did not like rhetoric because A, it was rhetoric. A, it hid the truth. B, it wasn't dialectic. No. A, it hid the truth. B, it was supposed to replace dialectic. C, it was only used for democracy. Or D, Aristotle liked it. Hid the truth. There you go. Plato felt that rhetoric actually hid the truth. I really need to learn how to practice my multiple choice questioning before I sit down to do it. All right. That was easy, right? Okay. Trying to think of questions. Those are really hard to do. But I could do like a list and define again. Because my brain doesn't work in multiple choice when I'm not writing it down. But what you should know is that the computer grades multiple choice but not short answer, which means I have to go in and grade the short answer. I'm kind of a lazy person. I don't know if you've noticed that. So you're more likely to have a multiple choice than a short answer, but here it's easier to do short answers. So let's just do a list. List for me the 5 canons of rhetoric, according to Cicero. Very good. Invention, arrangement, style, memory, and delivery. Very good. Okay, see, these aren't that hard. I know you're nervous about it, but I promise you, they are as easy as they sound. Okay. According to Quintilian, in order to be a good rhetorician, you also had to be A, educated, B, in the Senate, C, very loud, or D, a good person? Yes, you got to be a good person. The answer would be D. There you go. Very good. All right, you guys got this. Does that give you an idea of how the questions are going to be? Okay. Everything is at your disposal. The book, the computer, the notes, my lectures. Are you all able to access my lectures online? Do you know my YouTube channel? Okay, yeah. I mean, my YouTube channel is KRITIK 1999. If you ever want to look for me that way, you'll be able to tell because it will have all the lectures on crazy crap. Yes, that is critic. If you think about rhetorical criticism, critic. In 1999, because that's when I made up my Yahoo address. It's been a while. You can find me on YouTube. There's actually 2 channels, but both of them have lectures. So I don't know how to get rid of one. It's very crazy. But there's one that has many more videos than the other. That's the one you probably want to go with. If you want to subscribe to it so that you can just quickly access it whenever I put up these videos, because basically all you're getting is this interaction on the computer, or yeah, online. So it's a recording. You can use it if that's helpful to you in any way, shape, or form. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints, or threats at this time? There's only 3 of you. It's very hard to have a class that goes longer than like 45 minutes. What questions do you have for me? How many questions? Yeah. Well, it's only, 100 points or 150? I think it's 100 points. It's only 100 points, and like I'll make them worth different, like varied amounts of points that they're worth. So I always tell people, if you get a short answer question and you don't know how much to keep writing, look at what the point value is, right? If it's 5, go short. If it's 20, go long. You know what I mean, right? So because I do that, I don't have a set number, but I can tell you the shortest number, the least number of questions I've ever used is 11. The most, I think, was 17. So it's a matter of just how the points break down, right? Make sense? Any other questions? Yes?
I'm not the best at reading a book. Like, it takes a long time for me to sit down and read it and like just make myself go through it.
Mm-hmm.
What should I really be looking out for when I'm studying it? Because it's going line by line. I can do it. It just takes me a really long time, and I don't know if I'll be able to make it back through the lessons, not lessons, the book.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
So the book is organized chronologically the same way I talk about it. We don't cover everything that's in the book. So most likely, if I said it, it'll be on the book, it will be on the test. If I said it, you're going to be able to find it in the book, right? I think there's like a way to do Control F and find a word. So that's how I would do it. So if, for example, you got a question about ethos, logos, and pathos, and you didn't know what the answer was, I would Control F logos out of that thing until I found the right answer.
Okay.
How's that?
That's what I usually do. I was like, I'm going to put effort into this.
Well,
like,
effort
learn
is
this
good,
video.
but you do not need to memorize the book. No,
Okay.
I'm not that kind of tester. Mainly because I hated that when I was a kid, and rote memorization, I say kid, but in college too, rote memorization was what my professors did, and it was, awful. My favorite professor in the whole wide world, she said with dripping sarcasm, Dr. Jarapowicz. Yes, I remember his name. We had a room like this with 3 chalkboards, and they were green. And he wrote with yellow chalk, and he hand wrote. And he would start in like that corner over there and go all the way over. And when I say he filled them up, it was with things like this. Like that small, all the way across. And I couldn't learn a damn thing. I don't know how I passed that. I don't know if I passed that class. And it was Western civilization prior to 1800. Oh my God. I don't know. That is a stupid way to teach, if you ask me. I also think it's stupid to teach by standing in front of people and talking and expecting them to understand. Mainly because we don't teach you all how to take notes anymore. We also don't teach you how to take notes from reading either, which, makes your question more than legitimate. It used to be that people used to make us outline things when we read them. So we would write like Aristotle, and then we would start with book 1, says this, this, and this, and we were able to pick out the main ideas. A professor I had at the University of Oklahoma in '99 told me I should be able to outline my papers not just forwards, but also backwards. Because they should match. You should, if you reread your paper, it should be the same going forward as it is going back. And it makes sense, but you all aren't taught how to do that, and you're not taught how to take notes from an oral presentation either. So, by the time you get here, I'm not taking the time to do it, So I don't expect you to, believe me, that it's not, you don't learn anything that way, right? The only way you're gonna learn something is not memorizing it, but actually knowing it because it's in your brain now. So if you were able to answer questions without looking at your notes, you didn't memorize that, you learned it. You didn't remember it, you learned it, and that's sort of the goal. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I know you're not going to learn everything, but the idea of this class is, for example, paper 1, you'll learn something. One thing, at least. Paper 2, you're doing a full-on analysis. You're going to learn a lot by writing that paper. And, I still have students who come up to me and they're like, oh, Dr. Dudash, I wrote this paper in your class, it was blah, blah. And I'm like, okay. I've been doing this for 20 years. I don't know what paper, who wrote when. I remember a few, but when you're grading, 30 papers a semester, twice a semester, it gets lost. It gets lost in there. But that doesn't mean I don't remember a few. The idea is that you're going to remember a few things too. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay, so my goal is not torture. However, when you talk to other people about this class, please keep up my reputation that I am a total pain in the ass bitch. I gotta have my tough guy rep. People think this is the hardest class in the world, and I want them to continue to think that. Okay? Deal? Okay. Any other questions I can answer today? Does everybody have a topic for their paper? No? What are you doing?
I'm gonna do the
what?
Play-Doh and
You're going to do the comparative views of rhetoric? Okay. You only got 3 to choose from.
I wanted to look for a title, like a thing I wanted, just to make sure it wasn't too broad, but something with style kind
Okay.
of thing. But if I can't find anything about that by like tomorrow, then I'm just going to do compare and contrast Aristotle and Plato, because that's also interesting. It's just,
Yeah.
I want to find something, and if I can't, then
Well, and style is something, and remember, you only have to focus on what we've done. So Aristotle didn't spend a lot of time on style, but we know Cicero did, which means Quintilian wrote something about it. And you know that Augustine had a very specific purpose for style. So that is something that you could probably narrow properly.
okay, thank you.
You bet. Do you need any help with the topic, or are you just gonna wing it?
Yeah, I'll just keep thinking about it. I'm gonna do like the first option that you gave us.
Pick a concept?
Yeah, I
Okay.
just haven't looked at it yet. So.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, like you said, don't get too big and don't get too small, like I said in the directions, I think, or at some point.
I'll probably run it by you.
That's fine. Yeah, just pop me an email and, you know, like I said, as long as you're not like, I'm going to do Aristotle or I'm going to do rhetoric. Okay. No, we're not. But
Give an example. I use like errors. It's like it should be on this scale. Ethos and deep dive in ethos. Power in the Roman Empire. It should be in the middle of this. I was like, yeah.
yeah,
it clicks.
basically. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. Exactly. Exactly. All right, everybody. I guess I'm going to have to let you go. Next week, you know what? I'm going to put in this push. Number one, reading about a woman writing in the medieval period is kind of interesting, but reading about Ramus, super entertaining. So you might want to take a look at those. All right, I'll see you next week.